Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. This week saw the Brexit question once again top the EU agenda. The heads of state of the 28 member countries came together to mull over possible reforms for the UK's relationship with the EU. Money, as always, matters, and we will focus on the financial side of things in our debate in just a few minutes. But first, let's take a quick snapshot look at what exactly came out of the summit.
From the outset of negotiations, the British Prime Minister had been slamming on the brakes to EU integration.
Ever since we joined, Europe has been on the path to something called ever closer union. It means a political union. We've never liked it, we've never wanted it. And today we've permanently carved Britain out of it, so we can never be forced into political integration with the rest of Europe.
Even with the UK's special status within the bloc, it's a huge concession given it's one of the EU's fundamental tenets. And not only did Cameron come away with guarantees over British sovereignty, he got the right to veto Brussels regulation outright, as long as he gets the backing of 55% of EU parliaments. The British leader also managed to ensure protection for the nation's social welfare. It prevents new arrivals from the continent seeking certain benefits, if not to the 1 million European migrant workers already in the UK, at least until 2020. Protection too for the British financial sector, worth a hefty 10% of the country's GDP, with promises the 9 EU nations which don't use the euro won't be sidelined. And British regulators will maintain control over banks and markets, a safeguard against further European oversight. London won't get a veto over Eurozone matters, and it could also now face stiff competition from other European financial hubs like Paris and Frankfurt. One other potential pitfall: the deal needs a positive result in the referendum over the UK staying in the EU, or it'll automatically implode. There are now just 4 months before it goes ahead.
OK, well, let's now get down to just that economic element of a possible Brexit. For those who want the UK to opt out, the EU represents too much regulation that stifles the economy. Leaving, they say, would mean being able to strike better trade deals. For those who want in, membership of the world's largest trading bloc is clearly the best thing for business. So financially, which is it? Is the UK better off in or out? Well, to give us their opinions, we have Ms NEENA GILL, British MEP for the Labour Party and a member of the Committee of Economic and Monetary Affairs here in Brussels. Opposite you, I have Ms Catherine Bearder, a British MEP for the Liberal Democrats. Also joining us beside you, I have Mr GUNTRAM Wolf, Director of BRUEGEL Institute, a think tank here in Brussels specialised in economics. And joining us as well, Ms Constance Legris, a French MEP for the EPP, the European People's Party. Mr Wolf, maybe I'll start with you. That unemotional, economic, clear opinion, better in or out, in a word?
I would say definitely better in. Outside, it's going to be very tough. I mean, there will have to be negotiations about the terms of the access to the single market, the continental single market. There will have to be new negotiations, trade deals with China, with the US, and so on. And my hunch is that for the UK, it will be much more difficult to secure good terms of deals, trade deals, with international partners, but also with the EU than being within the EU.
Well, let's look at that trade element for a moment. The in crowd say that staying in the EU means the UK avoids export tariffs. It's also part of a stronger bloc, meaning it can negotiate better. But the out say that they have freedom to really negotiate one-on-one with different countries, with Asia, with Australia, and get a better deal. Mr. Gill, what do you think?
Well, I think that's the total unknown. Number one, we actually have agreed to give our trade competence to the EU. And we actually don't have very many people left who can negotiate this. But I think most importantly, why would all those countries that have negotiated a deal with the EU say, we want to give a better deal to the UK? You know, what are we going to offer them? And I think it's really unrealistic to think that we could immediately, or even over a period of 2-3 years, be able to enter into trade deals with 130 or more countries.
Ms. Bearder, you also think it's pie in the sky?
Absolutely. I mean, a single market is so much more than a trade deal. It's access all areas. So we have that already. Now, why on earth would we give that up? And then, of course, other countries, India and Japan and other countries that want to trade with the European Union, look at the numbers. If you're going to access a market, you want the biggest market, so you can get a good deal there. Whereas we're 65 million in the UK, as opposed to 500 million people in the European Union, the figures just don't stack up. That gives an enormous amount of clout. Just take the trade deal that's going through at the moment, TTIP, the transatlantic with America. If the EU does the trade deal and then the UK comes along and says, can we have a different one? The Americans will say, no, you have the same.
But do you think, I mean, the UK is the world's 5th largest economy. Can people snub the UK, Mr.
Quite
Wolff?
easily.
I think they won't snub it, but I don't think we will get really beneficial deals that will benefit the UK economy. I mean, as it is, the economy is already predicted that, you know, if we were to exit, that it would drop by 2%. House prices would go up by 10%. You know,
but again, it's all
drop,
unknown.
Not
so
go up,
is that
drop by
scaremongering,
10%. And so they're going to be major. The pound has dropped by 8%. So they're going to be major negative effects. So we're not going to be a robust an economy that people will want to do deals with us.
Mr. Wolff, is that, did you think, you know, we're giving out these figures, but at the same time we say it's a jump into the void. So is that scaremongering, saying that, you know, GDP is going to plunge in the UK?
Well, you know, I think it all depends on what will be the final outcome. I mean, what kind of deals will be gotten in the end. And so I think the first question is what would happen during the 2 years of renegotiation and the exit negotiation, which is a very long period. And already during that period, there's lots of uncertainty. I mean, companies will refrain from investing in the UK during these 2 years just because, you know, you don't know what kind of access you get to the single market. So already these 2 years, I think, will be painful. But then there is the more long-term question. And there, I mean, I just don't believe, yes, UK may be the 5th economy in the world, but frankly, it's very small compared to China. It's very small even to India, and we will not be able to secure good deals. And also the EU will be weaker, by the way, because our weight towards China and so on will go down.
Now, one thing UK has said, or a lot of the Out campaign rather, have said there's too much regulation in the European Union. There's too much red tape. It needs to be done away with. Ms. Le Gris, do you think they have a point on that, that perhaps there's too much bureaucracy and that stifles
Yes,
business?
absolutely. I do think they have a point on this. And in the past, the European Union produced maybe in some extent on some issues, in some sectors, too many regulations. But I strongly believe that Britain should remain in the European Union, of course, and also because one of the messages that the United Kingdom is actually telling us is that we need more competitiveness, we need to fight against red tape, against
So that's a common goal
heavy
for
regulation,
all EU
and
members,
to
I guess.
a more integrated single market, of course.
I
And
think on
we share these opinions, and to fight against the administrative burdens is a common opinion and a common concern, of course.
I think on regulation, we often forget that how many regulations are actually deleted as a result of the one European regulation. So that you have one regulation that applies across 28 member states, instead of having 27 other regulations to deal with, which because
In some ways it become more complicated to be out.
It's even more complicated. You know,
paperwork.
this is what people who are outside, countries outside face, is that actually having that one piece of regulations, and so that's often forgotten.
That is the basis of the single market, is it not? Single market, single rules. So can we go to complete the single market? Because in terms of services, it's still not complete. Can we complete it without?
Yeah, I think the UK really faces a fundamental problem. And the fundamental problem is that to deepen the single market, we are now at a stage, especially in banking, in capital markets, but also in labor markets, where we go beyond regulation. We are starting to talk about supervisory actions. We are starting to talk about, you know, who's managing the stability of the financial system. We are starting to talk about labor market institutions. And my hunch is that the more the Eurozone is to succeed, and that's a big question if it is to succeed, but the more it wants to succeed, the more the Eurozone will integrate on those markets, including with institution building. And the UK will be outside, and that by itself will drive a wedge on the single market. The creation of a deeper Eurozone will be a problem for the UK, and so we will have to find governance mechanisms in these regulated markets that limit the UK, that limit the Eurozone majority influence.
This is really a big question on the table right now, because 19 of the 28 EU countries are part of the Eurozone. That has led to a lot of worries in the UK that they will push through legislation in their favour.
The biggest capital market is in London, and it's important that we use that, and it is a resource to the rest of the EU as well. So it's important that they are protected, but I don't think it's ever envisaged that we would be able to veto anything.
But I think it's worth remembering there aren't just two currencies in the European Union. There are others as well. I mean, the pound is a big currency and a big world currency, but there are others. So, you know, we're moving forwards with the regulation of the euro because it is a new currency and it has gone through turmoil. And so that is, but there are other currencies as well that we need to be managing all of those.
I'm still wondering how would leaving the European Union, how would the UK withdrawing from the European Union, it's going to be affected by the euro come what may, is it not?
Absolutely.
So how?
Well, I mean, I think, if I may, the problem the UK faces is actually quite similar whether it is inside or outside. The problem is that there is a deeper, more integrating Eurozone, deeper, more integrating continent, and the UK is outside. And being outside of the EU will diminish the influence on governance because, you know, you two will not be in the European Parliament anymore, being outside. But, you know, that's I think on the governance side we have a problem. But in terms of the economics, the UK will always have to rely on the internal market, on the continental market. And so you cannot escape your geography, basically.
No. Now, one thing we're hearing a lot of talk about as well is looking at the banks, the city, as we call it now, this financial hub that has set up in London. Fears are that could go if the UK left the EU. Is that actually possible?
Well, HSBC are already talking about that and saying, although they've decided to keep their HQ in London, that they would be looking to moving their jobs to Paris or to Germany. Yes, because and you will start to lose the attractiveness of attracting across the world people coming to London because it's a hub, and so they will start to move to other parts. And so
I think this will not happen immediately. I think you know, this will be a very slow process. So you know, there are those who would say we're scaremongering that they won't go because they will stay. I think it will happen over a decade or so that slowly, as the impact of being out and, you know, the advantage of being in, which is, you know, they will slowly find that some of the American banks, maybe they're already looking in one way. They're already looking at Ireland and other places.
It's not just the banks; it's the capital that the banks hold, and the capital flight. We already in the UK get the most inward investment from outside the European Union. Now that will change, and people will be looking to not invest in the UK when there is that big market next door. So the capital flight is a huge worry for everybody in the UK. That's
perhaps another point. A lot of people look at the cost of being a member of the European Union. The inside, those who want the UK to stay in, say the UK pays roughly £340 per year per household, but it gets back in worth and benefits and other terms it's something like £3,000. And they point out that in or out, to be part of a single market, you're going to have to pay anyway. However, the out campaign, they say that if Britain was no longer a part of the EU, it could stop spending £350 million a week and use that to create its own industries.
They have some very creative figures. But what you have to remember is even Norway, that is not in the EU, pays 80% of what we pay per head of population to have access to that single market. So they're already paying into it. They still have to pay tariffs on their fish and other products that come in to the European Union. So they have to obey all the rules without having anybody at the table making those regulations.
And I
think to give that up would be really madness for the Brits.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that actually what EU has done with EU funding is it's kind of create a greater equality amongst the regions. And so there's no guarantee that a Whitehall, Westminster-based government is going to put that money. I represent the West Midlands, and whether that money is ever going to get to the West Midlands, because all the evidence shows that the government funding goes to London and the South East.
Would you be more reassured coming from Brussels?
So there are greater discrepancies. So if you come from outside London, the South East, actually it's the EU funding that helps you address very many local challenges that are faced.
Okay, well, that's a very strong Ms. Le Gris.
As a French MEP, I see all the advantages and all the benefits that we have all together, Europe as a whole, to have United Kingdom with us in the European Union, with the big challenges that we are all facing together and which are absolutely common to all European countries: terrorism, refugee crisis, climate change, all these big...
It's not just about the money.
No, it's not just about money, benefits. We have to keep together.
We're going to have to wrap it up there, sadly, but clearly there's a lot more to debate on this issue, and we will have time to do it before any referendum is put to the British people. I'd like to thank my guests here in the studio for being with me. Thanks to you at home also for having joined us. That wraps it up for this edition of Talking Europe.